Hello, students. Welcome to HL3 video lesson. A reminder about your video lessons. You can always pause the video lesson or go back in order to write down things in your guided notes. You can use your back arrow on your keyboard on your Chromebook, and it'll skip back and review again so that you can get your answers filled out on your guided notes. All right, so let's talk about decision making and the teen brain. That is HL3. So, we're going to talk about what the decision making process looks like, what are the steps of that process, and then we're going to take a look at what influences decisions that people make. How do teenagers make decisions? What impacts those choices that they make? All right, so first of all, let's talk about this step-by-step process for decision making. We use the word decide to take a look at this acronym. So D. The D in decide is the first step. Define the decision. What's the problem? What's the decision that needs to be made? That's your D. E. E is you've got the problem figured out. Now you have to look at all the options. What are the possible options for fixing this problem? What are all the possibilities that could happen as a result? What are all the possibilities? Brainstorm. Then you've got C. Consider the consequences. So you have to take each of those possible options and go, what would happen if I chose that option? What are the different consequences? What would happen if for each of the possibilities? Then I is identify the influences, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. What is having an impact on that choice for you? What are the influences? Is it peer pressure? Is it the media? Is it my parents? What is actually influencing my decision? Then you put all those things together, the consequences and the influences, and you look at it and you make a choice and you act on it. And lastly, after you've made your choice and you've had some time to look back on it, how did that impact my health and happiness? What might I do differently in the future? So this is our 6-step process for decision making. And we will be working through that in a couple examples and activities for this lesson. All right, so what is a risk factor? A risk factor, protective factor we'll do first. A protective factor is something that a person has in their life that prevents them, reduces the chances that they'll choose a risky behavior. So if you have parents that give you a curfew, parents that tell you need to be home at a certain time, you're less likely to make a risky choice on Friday night. Okay, less likely. Protective factors. The example, positive parental influences. Risk factors are things that a person has in their life that increases the chance of a negative behavior. You're more likely to choose a risky behavior if your parents aren't a good influence. You're much more likely to choose something risky. That's just one example. So here's what it looks like just in a nutshell, okay? So protective factors lead to wellness behaviors, and they prevent risk behaviors. Remember, these are choices people make. These are things people have in their lives, okay? So risk factors prevent wellness behaviors, and they lead to risk behaviors. All right. So what are some things that affect the teen decision making? There's internal influences and external influences. These are a list of external influences. And these are things that are from the outside. people or things that we see or we hear, like your parents, your friends, your peers, society, media, TV, movies, commercials, things we see on the internet have an impact on our choices, video games, culture, laws, legal consequences, other adults. Maybe you've got other adults like your teachers, relatives, coaches, all that stuff. And the environment, and the effect of alcohol and drugs. If you're drunk or high, it's going to have an influence on the decisions that you make. Probably not a positive one. So, this is a list of influences from the inside, things that we feel, things that we think. Maybe you're curious. Peer pressure. Peer pressure can be inside or outside. From the inside, peer pressure is basically a desire to fit in. Fears, desires. Maybe you're not looking at the future and you just want to feel better now. Sure, I'm hungry. I could use some McDonald's. Let's go. I'll skip fifth hour. Not really thinking about the future. Your morals, your character, what you like and don't like, what you're interested in, your image. And one of the keys, having a teenage brain. So now we're going to take a look at the teenage brain and what the teenage brain has to say about decision making as a teen. So here's a brain. Okay, it's divided up into these 5 areas. Okay, now there's a whole bunch more complicated stuff, but this is a basic 5 areas. You've got the prefrontal cortex up here. The prefrontal cortex is in charge of making logical, well thought out, rational decisions. So you think of the consequences, you consider things, okay, you go through that step by step without even thinking. Problem is, in teenagers, this is the last part of the brain to mature. So your capability of using this part of your brain isn't very likely, okay? So you're more likely to be impulsive. You're more likely to take risky chances. You're more likely to do things that are immature and prone to high risk because your prefrontal cortex is not working. It doesn't start functioning fully until 25 years old. All right, so let's take a look at this amygdala down here. This is the emotional core. This is where things are passionate and where fear comes in and aggression and sadness and all of those emotions. This part of a teenage brain, you rely on this for your decision making as a teenager. Okay, adults rely on their prefrontal cortex. Teenagers have a tendency to rely on their amygdala. So they're more likely to make decisions that are based on emotion. All right, let's go up here to the ventral striatum. It's the 3rd one on your chart. Okay, this is the reward center. Okay, and it's not fully developed in teens. So you are more excited about those rewards. Okay, if you see a reward, a big reward, that excites you. If you do something, you see something, you like it, you're probably going to do it again. Okay, let's go now to parietal lobe. It's up here, it's this yellow area. This is touch, sight, language. Teenagers don't process information effectively when it comes to visual input. They oftentimes misinterpret facial expression or misinterpret what they're hearing, the sound, the tone, which is why teachers have to be careful with things like sarcasm and how they say things when their mask is on their face and they can't be seen. So that's what the parietal lobe does. And the final is the hippocampus. Now, this is some good news. You have a hippocampus, which is in charge of memory and learning. Right now, it is at prime time for learning new information. Unfortunately, as you grow older, and time goes on, you aren't as able to learn new information. So if I tried to learn a language, it would be much more difficult than if a 15-year-old person tried to learn a new language. So those are those 5 areas. You'll see more of those when we talk about our, when we see the little movies in a little bit. All right, so when it comes to the teen brain and it comes to motor vehicle crashes, the risk of those crashes is higher among teens. Now remember, this is the leading cause of death for people in your age group. Accidents, specifically motor vehicle accidents. Okay? Per mile driven, teen drivers in this age group are nearly 3 times more likely than drivers 20 and older to be in a fatal crash. And that is a fact from the CDC. So you are going to watch a couple videos about the teen brain. You're going to watch a couple videos about distracted driving, and you're going to answer a couple questions after each one. So, what are the healthy choices? The last question on your notes asks you to identify 3 things that teenagers could do to be more safe when they drive. What are 3 things a teenager could do to be more safe when they drive? All right, read this. Gregor out.